you ever played a card game where the deck just feels like it's as smooth as butter, where everything just runs one into another and everything just goes so smoothly? That's this deck, baby. Hello everyone, welcome to yet another deck profile, this time taking a look at Gear Chronicle. Despite being one of the clans that helped me actually kick off YouTube in the first place, I've never actually played this clan before, and this is actually my first time touching it. But honestly, this is probably my favorite deck right now in Standard, and like makes me love the format so damn much because a lot of decks are either as fun as this or really close in levels of fun, and honestly I'm really hyped to show you this because it is so damn fun. Not only that, it's also incredibly competitive, argued by some people as one of the best decks in the format, so I'm really hyped to show you everything about it. I've been playtesting a lot. I think this is the most I've been playing in terms of like playtesting in a long time, because it's basically like every single day after work, just playtest with the boys. Like every single time there's like a few hours of space just to sit down and play, we're basically playtesting, and that's basically like most of that playtesting has been with this deck of all things. So yeah, it's been really fun. Deck profiles going forward will also be a little bit more heavier in detail, I guess, or in information, because I want these to be good resources for people that are practicing for Springfest. You know, Standard after Clan Selection 2 won't be really changing much in the meta anymore because we have all the releases and Overdress doesn't really change anything. So if you want to be like seriously looking at Springfest, then hopefully these deck profiles will help you as well. And I'm putting in a lot of time into each deck to like make it as best of a build as possible and understand the different lines of play as best as possible so that it can be a good resource for you guys that are practicing for Springfest. Anyway, enough talking, let's actually get into the deck. So of course, the main grade 3 of all is our favorite buddy boy, Chronojet Dragon. So the main character of the G era, the main card, the sort of elemental hero Neos, I guess, of Vanguard in a way, simply because of, you know, being the mascot unit of the second generation. So what does Chronojet do and how does he actually perform in this meta? So his first skill, I'm pretty sure a lot of you are familiar with, is you can discard one or more cards from your hand that sum up to grades 3 or greater, and if you do, you search your deck for any grade 4 card, write a stand, shuffle your deck, at the end of the turn retire that unit and write a grade 3 from your soul as rest. So of course it basically mimics Stride, as a lot of you guys are aware. That's what Gear Chronicle mainly does in Standard. And so you write this, you get a force marker, usually a force 1 in this build. I know that previously it was like force 2, but honestly this deck I've mostly been going into force 1 because of how good your going first turn is now thanks to the new support, and also your going second potential thanks to a lot of the new cards. So this, usually you're going for force 1, and being able to make 2 markers on the first time you write a grade 3 is really good. And then of course you make at least 1 force marker per turn after that as well, because you always rewrite at the end. So of course it's important, and you know, the discard, it also changes into other effects, which is pretty cool as well. And then the second skill is Vanguard Reaper Circle. When he attacks, count +1, and he gets plus 5k for that battle, and your opponent cannot call sentinels from their hand to guard against this attack. So of course that also mimics his original skill from G. Let me zoom in a little bit so you guys get a closer view here. So it mimics the original skill from G, and this skill, the second one, is kind of your win con in a way, because it is essentially, you know, we have Chrono Dragon next stage that basically rewrites into this during the battle phase, so you can attack with him as a second Vanguard attack, but that like it scales in 2 different ways. The one way it scales is for each force marker, obviously under him, the bigger he gets. So you know, you have 2 force 1s on this, then it's 33, becomes 38 with that skill, and can become even higher with other skills. So there it gets slowly harder for them to guard without sentinels. But of course if they're on 3 damage, they're just going to take this because it's only 2 drive checks. The only way they're going to die 3 damage to this is going to be a double crit. But of course, you know, when your opponent's at like 5, this is incredibly pressuring. Even at 4, to be honest, they have to already start sweating. If they take this without guarding, you know, against this massive attack, they're risking to just get crit for game. So that's another thing that's really important to take note. So just keep in mind that this card, you know, is the boss unit, is the only grade 3 in the deck, because it, you know, turns on the entire deck's function. But it's really important to keep in mind that this scales in 2 different ways, and that therefore it is the win con of the deck in that exact way. So of course his best buddy, the main grade 4 that you do go into at most cases, is the Chrono Dragon next stage. So Chrono Dragon next stage is of course the main grade 4 that you go into, as I mentioned. Only has 1 skill and has bombastic art. I really love what they did with next stage's art in the V series. I loved his original art a lot too, but I think this one is really cool as well. Like you can see how just amazingly detailed it is. It's very nice. So end of the battle, did he attack the grade 3 or greater Vanguard? If your soul has a Chronojet Dragon, you discard 2, retire this unit, and then ride the Chronojet from your soul as stand, and at the end of turn he gets plus 15k power and you cannot ride. So the important thing with this, well, there's actually a lot of important things. First things first, this card is a a way to multi-attack, so a way to secure 2 Vanguard attacks per turn. However, it's only when your opponent's on grade 3, therefore you cannot do it going first. Therefore, Gear Chronicle didn't have that much in terms of going first rides, but now they do thanks to clan selection. But going second or any turn after that, this is really great because it basically gives you 2 Vanguard attacks and it powers up the second one by 15k, which makes that Chronojet guard restrict even more powerful. Now the other thing is that it discards 2. It doesn't have any other cost, therefore you can do this even if you're Counterblast starved. And we have a lot of effects that proc off of being discarded, and that actually raises the ceiling of this deck. If you don't know, like, ceiling basically means how much more potential it has. This discard 2 raises the ceiling of the deck incredibly now after clan selection, because you can actually discard 2 to make this into a potential 5-6 attacks. So for that reason, it's really important to keep in mind, and your force position is really important with this as well, because keep in mind, when you retire this to rewrite the Chronojet, you will gain another force marker. So the way that you obtain force is really important, and I'll talk about that more later on in the video. So we're going to go through the deck first, then we're going to go over some mulligans, and then we're going to go over some combo examples and how you play going first, going second, force markers, and stuff like that. So 3 next stage, also 3 not 4, because now after clan selection you can recycle it really easily. So the 4th one honestly is not required. You have such an easy time recycling this now, and like even if you draw all 3, like you can honestly ditch it in like turn 2 and recycle it already before you actually go into the, you know, going second grade 3 turn. So important to keep that in mind. And yes, next stage is fantastic. Probably the most expensive card in the deck though. I got it for really cheap because I bought it way earlier before clan selection came out, but it is very much a staple and, you know, the core card for the deck. And then of course our new buddy is the Time Leaper Dragon. So this is the new grade 4 from this clan selection volume 1, and this card is honestly incredibly amazing because this gave Gear Chronicle the best going first ride possible, because you ride, you discard on Chronojet, you go into this, and it says when he attacks a Vanguard, you put a rearguard on the bottom of your deck. So search your deck for a card with a grade equal to the card put in the bottom of your deck +1. So basically, if you put a grade 1 to the bottom, you search for grade 2. If you put a grade 2 to the bottom, you search for grade 3. And so that's basically how it works. It's literally Time Leap. However, it calls it and then gives it 10k. So it's Time Leap with a 10k bonus. And let me just tell you that this card enables a 5 attack combo on your going first turn, thanks to all the cards that have come out in clan selection. So not only does Gears now have a good, like, you know, potential 4 attack turn on their going first, but they can actually make 5 attacks. They're not super huge, but considering that your opponent is at like, you know, 9 or 10k, it's really big. And for that reason, this card is amazing. I played 2 copies because you only really go into this once, but sometimes if you scale really far into the late game, where you have like a bunch of force markers laying around everywhere, this multi-attack facet can actually be really good, because you basically get to abuse those force markers for those multi-attacks if you put them on the rearguard circle, and therefore sometimes going into the second Time Leaper, it doesn't really come up. Like on even 1 in 10 games, it doesn't really come up, but every so often there might be a situation and it's worth testing for that. But in many cases, next stage is still the better ride, but honestly, this is still worth considering. And honestly, running 2 is safe purely for the fact that like one of them might go to the damage zone, you might hit it early and not have a way to recycle it. So it's good to run a second one just for insurance purposes. Now, normally I would go into grade 2s, although we went from grade 3s to now 4s, and now we're going down to grade 1s. And the reason I want to look at the grade 1s is because these are mainly the combo pieces in the deck that actually raise the deck ceiling, and are also these search cards for the most part as well, whereas the grade 2s kind of enable those combos. So we're going to look through the actual combo cards first, and then we're going to look through the enablers. And I guess next stage is already an enabler himself. So first grade 1 to take a look at is the brand new one, which is the Lost Gear Dog 8. I really like this card for the simple reason that if you read his flavor text, only 8 believes in its owner returns. So this is actually a reference to Hachiko, which is a statue in Shibuya. So if you know, you can Google about it. It's pretty famous. I think if you're into any sort of, like Japanese culture thing, you'll probably be aware of it. But Lost Gear Dog 8 is as grade 3 searchery of a grade 3 searcher from G as possible. So his skill is, when placed from hand, you reveal a grade 3 or greater card from your hand. So it can be your grade 3, it can be one of your grade 4s that we looked at. If you do, you search your deck for a grade 3, reveal it, put it into your hand, shuffle your deck, and if you put a card into your hand, you have to discard cards that are equal to grade 3 or greater. So this is quite literally a stride fodder from G. You place it, you reveal a grade 3 or higher, and then you essentially just like search for a specific grade 3. So if your opening hand doesn't have a Chronojet, you can actually like, but you have like a next stage or you have a Time Leaper, you can reveal it, add the Chronojet to your hand, and then discard that card and then recycle it with a card that we're going to look at later. On top of that, you can also discard this card as a grade 3, which a few cards in this deck have. We do have a grade 2 that allows us to do that already, but this is also a really nice added consistency card for the deck. Some people still play the Steam Breath, which is, you know, the traditional grade 3 searcher, the on-play top 5 search for a grade 3 that also gets plus 5k. So that's the thing that kind of puts Steam Breath over this card, is that that card gains 5k, this one does not. This one is an extra consistency card in my opinion, but it does not gain extra 5k power, therefore it's not as big of a body, especially going first. But in my opinion, you already dish out enough power in this deck and you already have enough of like powerful turns that I don't think you need that extra 5k body that much from the Steam Breath. And I think the Lost Gear Dog 8 with the added consistency, like you can open your hand and like not have a grade 3 but have a grade 4, but let's say have like a Ribble that you want to keep in your opening hand, and you'll be fine with keeping it because you have this card that will search out your Chronojet. Like this direct consistency to just like instantly search your Chronojet is so damn good, and not that many decks actually have this level of consistency that I think it's just not worth putting up. I know there's a big debate over which of these is more worth it, whether this or the Steam Breath, but I'm personally in the 8 camp, I guess. But of course, you know, there's going to be different analysis and different people talking about this, and I think it's worth to listen to all of it. And I'm personally like, I wouldn't be against if it somehow eventually proves to be the better meta call to play the Steam Breath, but for now I think 8 is definitely really good, purely for the way that it adds consistency to the deck. Now, by far the most important combo piece that in my opinion put this deck into tier 1, and you know, the reason why it managed top in Japan doing Luard meta, and the reason why this deck can even exist in my opinion, is the Ribble. So Ribble is such an important grade 1, I cannot stress it enough. This card used to be a promo and is now a easily obtainable card from client selection. So what does she do and why she's so damn good? When discarded from hand during your turn, so for literally any purpose, if she's discarded, Soul Blast 1 and call her. And if you do, she gets plus 5k until end of turn. Then you can put a normal uniform drop zone at the bottom of your deck to draw a card. So every line of that text is amazing. First things first, you can discard her for anything, not necessarily for the like Chronojet stride cost, not necessarily for anything. If any effect says to discard something like next stage, for example, then you can Soul Blast 1 and call her out and she gets 5k. She'll be 13k as a beater on her own with a force that's 23, only scales with more forces. And then on top of that, she can recycle your normal units to draw you a card for basically no other cost. That's amazing because you can basically use next stage first, retire it, then, you know, discarding this. The next stage retires and rides the Chronojet first, then this resolves and calls itself out and recycles that next stage for you while drawing you a card. Therefore, it's one of those cards that helps you to always have a big hand in this deck and basically just like find more combo pieces. Like the double Ribble turns are insane because you can basically go like swing rearguard, swing next stage retire, like drop a Ribble, use her effect to call it over the rearguard that attacked, then you have a fresh attack basically going for 5 because you go rear, van, then go rear, van, rear, you know, something like that. Or hell, you can discard like attack with both rears, discard both Ribbles, and then go like, all right, rear, next stage discards both, call both to the front row, and you get 2 more rearguard attacks and the Vanguard attack. So that's like, depends on where your force marker placement is, but that is a potential play. Also, there's a grade 2 that discards off of being called, which can also be used with Time Leaper to call this out in the middle of the battle phase as well, even going first. Like this card is just amazing in every single way possible. The worst part about her is that you Soul Blast a fair bit in this deck, so you have to be really careful with your soul management. But honestly, after you play this deck a lot, you will get better and better at that soul management that you won't need to like struggle about it too much. And honestly, if you open this in your opening hand, you do keep it. Like for the mulligan, you do keep it, not to ride it, but to actually like keep it as a combo piece in your hand to go into and use later on for those kill turns. Like having this card and being able to extend into yet another attack, whether it's a 4th or a 5th, like it's so damn good for that reason. And therefore I think that this card is just fantastic. Like I cannot stress it enough. Ribble, in my opinion, carries this deck so hard. But before Ribble, of course, there was Chronotooth Tigar, and it's not like he's gone either. This was the card before Ribble that basically did her job. So second skill I'll read first, which basically says when discarded from your hand during your turn, can almost 1 to draw a card and call this card to rearguard circle as rest. So does what Ribble does, but a little bit worse. You know, it counter blast instead of soul blasting, which is still good. You don't want to put your counter blast into something, but you know, it still draws you a card, but it calls itself at rest. This is nice to use on like turn 2, for example, if you're going first, because then you can like stand and draw and then like attack with it and then time leap it away into a grade 2. So that's also pretty nice because you get to recycle it. But the counter blast 1 to draw and call is basically like, it's really good because you discarded it just to call it out, and you also got to draw out of it, so your hand always stays big. On top of that, speaking of draw, this is your optimal ride target as well, going, you know, on your first ride, because at the start of your ride phase, you get to draw cards. So basically you ride this on turn 1, turn 2, you draw 2 cards at the start of the turn, which is really amazing because you draw into more pieces, you have more chance of finding ribbles or finding cards that enable ribble, and it's just overall really, really great. Like, this card is absolutely fantastic as well, and you should not be sleeping on it either, because I think it's really, really great. It's really, really great as a card, and also helps you, like, you can discard this. All the logic that I said about next stage, like discarding to like do stuff, applies to this card as well. So don't sleep on it, just do yourself a favor, honestly. And the best part is that all of this is really, really cheap now, thanks to being reprinted in clan selection. All right, so that's the grade 1s. So those are basically the main combo pieces. So you have, you know, your ribbles and you have your Chronotooth Tigars, which are essentially your way to, you know, get superior calls during the battle phase, or just, you know, for no reason for that matter. And we do need some cards to help us draw into those pieces or to enable them. So the first card that helps us draw into stuff and just in general add consistency to the deck in terms of like being able to do your plays is of course Smoke Gear Dragon. So the only 2 old cards you really need in this deck are Smoke Gear and Next Stage, and then everything else is either in the trial deck or in clan selection. So Smoke Gear says, first, the second skill is if your Vanguard is Chronojet Dragon, then when you discard a card from hand, it is regarded as a grade 3. So basically when Chronojet asks you to discard a grade 3 to Stride, you can, if you have this on the board, you can discard something like a Ribble or discard something like the Chronotooth Tigar, and basically just, you know, just do it like that without having to actually discard grade 3s. So it's really, really good. And then on top of that, when he attacks a Vanguard, he gets plus 5k, and then if you roll a grade 4 this turn, you may Soul Blast 1 to draw a card, which is really, really nice because 15k attacker is already cool because going first, that's relevant, and also even going second, like with an 8k boost, that's 23, but also Soul Blasting 1 to draw a card helps you draw into your Ribbles, helps you draw into your other combo pieces, and just, you know, is really, really good and super key for this deck as a whole. And then of course another card that got reprinted in clan selection is the Ear Cub. So Ear Cub is also a great card because he essentially, plain and simple, gives you extra drive checks. So once per turn, Vanguard Rigger Circle count +1, discard a card to give your Vanguard +1 drive. So of course, the same discard logic applies here. You can call, you know, your Chronotooth off of this, but that's kind of +2 for that play, so keep that in mind. You can call your Ribble off of this, although I generally don't recommend it because you want to keep your Ribbles for the battle phase. And then also you're going to be discarded as a grade 3 in case you don't have the Smoke Gear on the field, which is also really, really nice. So very simple card. This is like your optimal turn 2 ride because you just get to drive check 2 like a Blaster Dark while you're on grade 2. And so for that reason, I think this card is really, really nice. Again, helps you get extra cards in hand. If you can combo, you know, if you can discard a Chronotooth over this, then you basically get to put a body on the board while also drive checking more, so you don't actually, like, you just basically plus, and it's really, really nice for that reason. And also giving extra drive check to your next stage or to your Time Leaper is really nice as well. And now the new card, the new kid on the block, is the Zaid. So Zaid, I wasn't super sold on this guy until I figured out that this guy has a combo with Ribble and Time Leaper. So what does this guy do? When placed, Vanguard Rigger Circle, Soul Blast 1 and discard a card. So I was like, ooh, discard a card like that? I don't know about that. To draw a card, so it makes up for it. Choose an opponent's rearguard with grade less than or equal to the grade of the card discarded from your hand for this cost and retire it. So it's a field control, which this deck did not have before. And now suddenly we can actually pop like pesky targets. You're playing against Genesis. Oh, like Norn in the back with the Yggdrasil, just pop it if they're not sitting on a Regalia Vanguard. Oh, you're playing against like Shadows and they have like the grade 1 that gives them intercept for the grade 1s. Screw that, just pop it and there you go. Their defenses are slowly crumbling away. Like this pop is actually pretty good, but Soul Blast 1 to discard and draw is really nice because again, that can trigger a Ribble. So of course you can do it in your main phase too, but when going first on a Time Leaper, this is pretty hot, and I'm going to explain that combo a bit later. And of course the second skill is when it attacks, if you roll a grade 4 this turn, Soul Charge 1. So it basically refunds the Soul Blast that he used. I didn't like him either at first because I forgot about that second skill, because I was like, well, I'm Soul Blasting for Ribble and I'm Soul Blasting for Smoke here to draw. Why would I want to Soul Blast for this? And then I finally understood why this card is so good, and I do play as a 3 of, some people play as a 4 of, but I want to play one other grade 2 as a 1 of, just to run into situations where your opponent doesn't have a field or you don't have Ribble or Chronotooth to combo off of this, which is the 1 copy of Nabu. So Nabu, I ran him as a 4 of for a while, and now he's gone down to a 1 of. So his skill is when he attacks a Vanguard and Rearguard Circle, you bind any card from your drop zone to basically make it so that your opponent is guard restricted to only guard with grade 0s. And then at the end of that battle, you put him into your soul to draw a card. So he gives you soul, he gives you card in hand, and on top of that, he also removes himself from the field. Now, I've seen a few lists that run him as a 4 of because Chaos is really prominent in that local area. And yes, this does help to get around Chaos because the only way they lock your front row then is through Zirconium, and if you keep a back row open, open, you can call from the, you know, Zirconium lock call from that as well. If Chaos were to become super popular, I would probably bump this up to a few more copies, but for now it's actually fine to run as a 1-of. Why do I actually run it as a 1-of above anything else? Well, basically, like I said, if your opponent doesn't have a board, then this isn't popping anything, and if you don't have Ribble in hand, it's not really worth going into this either. And you can also search it out off of the Time Leaper, so you can basically just like search it out, attack with it with like 30k base power, because you put in a force marker, it gets plus 10k from Time Leaper, so that's 30k with a Guard Restrict. That's actually not too bad to like just get that 1 damage in, because it's important to use your going first turn, or in general, like it's important to push your opponent to like 3-4 damage, optimally 4, because that's where the next stage Chronojet turn becomes super just filled with pressure. And so for that reason, Nabu is pretty good in doing that, but I wouldn't necessarily play too many copies of him. And then finally, before we get into the combos and stuff, let's go over the triggers. It's very straightforward: 4 crit, 8 crit. One thing I didn't realize is that this is the same card, but the one on the left comes from the extra booster, the first ever Gear Chronicle extra booster in standard, and the second one comes from the trial deck. Look how different the lighting is. It's like this one's way darker and like zoomed out. The left one, I mean the right one, is like zoomed in and like way lighter. I might want to actually just like ask someone for a spare from a trial deck so like I have consistency, because it almost looks like a fake card, to be honest. But anyway, 8 crits here, so we have the 8 crits, you know, pretty self-explanatory. 4 heals, best girl Uluru, so she's a lot of people's favorite heal trigger in general. She was so popular that she won the clan popularity poll way back in G, and actually got like sleeves and I think a deck box made from her. And then of course 4 drop PGs. Drop PGs are important in this because like you can tank a lot of decks. Like if you play smart and don't let Gavriel do their like big pop-off turn with Hamiel on turn 3, you can then draw so many cards that you actually have like enough stuff in hand to like regularly guard against the Hamiel, and then you can just like take the victory next turn with the next stage. So that's a really nice thing about this deck, honestly. And so of course we run PGs for that reason. Crit Sentinels I think are not necessary right now, and the starter is Chronojet. All right, so that's all the cards in the actual deck. Now let's take a look at some combos for like, you know, your next stage turn, your Time Leaper turn, and then we're gonna look at some mulligans after that. All right, so let's take a look at a bit of a going first turn. So you're gonna ride your Chronojet Dragon here, and you're gonna put the Force 1 on the rearguard circle. So if you're going first, you want to generally put it on the rearguard circle because you can abuse that rearguard circle. And then let's just say like this is our hand, right? So you're gonna call like the smoke here, so you can discard anything for the stride, but for this example we'll discard the Chronojet. You can call this for the time leap targets. That's gonna be the Lost Gear Dog 8, and this is the hand you hold on to, or this is what you hold on to. You use the Chronojet to discard it for the quote-unquote stride, and then you go into the Time Leaper Dragon. So with this effect, there's only gonna be 15k, but your opponent's at like 10k or 9k depending on what kind of deck it is, and so you're going to be able to bash them a bunch of times. So what are we going to do? Well, let's just go in increasing power. We're going to swing with the 15k smoke gear. You can actually use this, you can look at your soul all the time. So let's say we haven't used the soul at all, you can actually like soul blast here to get the extra draw. So let's see, like, you know, we get the extra draw, maybe we draw into the Ribble here, stuff like that. You want to maybe use this if you haven't drawn the Ribble yet to see if you can do it. Then we can swing with the Lost Gear Dog 8, or any grade 1 for that matter. It's going to be 18k thanks to the force. So both of these have been 10k guards from your opponent. Then you're going to swing with a 15, which is technically a 10k guard for 1 to pass, but it's going to be a 20k guard for 2 to pass. So let's just say like whether they guard it or not doesn't really matter. We're going to target the Lost Gear Dog 8 for the time leap, so this is going to go back into the deck, and we're going to search a grade 2 because we time leap to grade 1, and we're going to search out the Zaid. So Zaid says, of course, you know, you already know his text, we're going to call him over the smoke gear, so we're going to reset that, and so the called unit gets plus 10k power, so it's going to be 20k power. When this is called, we're going to Soul Blast 1, so let's Soul Blast the Chronotooth Tigar and discard a card. We're going to discard the Ribble, and we're going to be able to draw a card. So we can draw and pop one of our opponent's cards. So because the Smoke Gear isn't on the field anymore, we can pop anything. And like even if Smoke Gear was there, you have to have a Chronojet Vanguard, which we don't at the moment. So we can only pop a grade 1 because we discarded a grade 1. And then because we discarded a grade 1, Ribble goes on standby, and we can Soul Blast 1, our last soul, to call out the Ribble here. And so now what you have is a 15k swing, and now a 20k swing here, and a 23k swing here. And don't forget that when Ribble is called, you're able to actually recycle one of your cards. So let's just say we recycle something like a Chronotooth Tigar to then draw a card. So then, you know, you just like draw your 1 card from the deck, and you know, just like that, you got a little bit of plus. Then you attack, you do your drive checks, put triggers wherever you want, you know, maybe like put it here because it's the bigger swing, or as you know, depending on the situation, what kind of defenses your opponent has checked. Then you swing for the 20 because it got plus 10k from the Time Leaper. You get to soul charge 1, and so you make up a bit of that soul that you lost from doing all those combos. And then the swings for a minimum of 23, and so you're like scaling to defensives at the same time, and it's really nice because going first, that's super good. And then you're basically gonna retire this at the end of turn, get yourself another force marker, and by rewriting, you know, the grade 3, and you're going to put it on Vanguard Circle to prepare for the next turn, next stage. So this was an example of like your basic time leaper chart turn. Basically, you won't always like do the big field reset to do like 5 attacks. Sometimes it might be better to like, you know, make a column that therefore it's a bit bigger, you know, you kind of like go for like certified damage rather than like banking on a defensive. So you don't always go for this like, you know, 5 attack combo. Sometimes you just go for like 4 attacks, but making sure that 4th attack definitely lands, because with something like this, you're basically going for this is a 30 because of the time leaper buff, and this is a 13, so you're going for the 43k attack, which is really huge going first. So you can definitely like make sure you land damage with that. So keep that in mind and adapt to whatever your opponent plays, what deck you're playing against, as well as what kind of defensives they've been hitting. All right, now for going second, you know, let's just say we took a bunch of damage and whatnot, so we're going to ride into Chronojet. After opponent's going first turn, we're going to get our force marker, and this time put it on the Vanguard Circle because we're going second, so the next stage is already live. And so now, of course, you can like call your smoke gear and whatnot if you need the extra like little stride fodder or whatever, but you know, just for the record, we can discard the Chronojet here to quote-unquote stride and go into the next stage. So of course, next stage will give us the second Vanguard swing and a bunch of pressure, but it's only gonna be 25 for now. We can call something like an ear cob and then use this effect to combos 1, discard 1. We can call something like the Chronotooth Tigar to draw an extra card and things like that. You can also call things behind the smoke gear here if you want to, you know, have like the 23k swing or things like that. Or otherwise, you could also like put this here and then put this here, so that this is already hitting for 15, this is hitting for 18, so that they're at least both hitting without having to commit any extra force markers. It depends on your hand, so kind of adapt to that as you do. So here, if you don't have any ribbles, what you can do is swing with a smoke gear first for 15 because your opponent's what, on like 12 or 13, so it's only a 5k guard, but you can swing with it, you know, Soul Blast 1 and just like try to actually find those ribbles. So let's say here, you know, we actually draw the ribble and now we have like, oh cool, we have a combo piece. That's very nice. And then of course we're going to swing with the next stage attacks, you know, those are your drive checks, you apply it wherever you want to. If you have a booster here, let's say like for example you had a booster here, right, you can sometimes, if your opponent's at like, this isn't like going on the first grade 3 turn going second, but later in the game, if your opponent's at like 4 or 5, you can sometimes like put triggers on the back row booster that you didn't swing like boost the next stage with, because that will make the Chronojet really difficult to guard. So that's like an extra tip that you can have. So after you discard 2 to retire this, you know, to rewrite the Chronojet and get the extra force marker, this will again depend on like what is the game looking like. Are you looking to, you know, are you looking to see this Chronojet get no guarded, or are they at like 4 or 5 damage and they're about to die? So if they're at like 3, you can put the force marker on the rear, and if you discarded a ribble or that effect, then of course you can use her effect to basically Soul Blast 1 and, you know, call her out on that force marker. Now she's going to be 23, extending that attack, and she of course can recycle one of your cards, so we can recycle the next stage here to actually reuse it next turn and draw an extra card from that too, which is nice. So then here, this gets plus 15 for the next stage anyway, so this is actually attacking for like 43 if you use a skill or 38 if you don't. So you can swing with, for example, like your ear cup turn, or like with your ear cup swing, which is like 18, maybe more if you check triggers, and then you can swing with the Chronojet, which will probably get no guard if they're at like 3. You check, see if you get any triggers, and you can swing with the ribble here as well. If you had 2 ribbles, for example, you know, on that next stage turn, you could have also just like, you know, swung with this rearguard circle first, or like swung unboosted maybe into one of their rears and then reset it into another ribble. So things like that you can think about and do. But if you don't have any ribbles, there might be some cases where you even go for like 2 force markers to the Vanguard already, especially if you manage to push your opponent a lot in the going first time leaper turn, because if you did push them to like 4, then you could try to already go for the kill on that, you know, turn 4 next stage. So it's really important to consider those kind of things, and like your force placement matters very much in terms of like extending your attacks with ribble and also with finishing games with the Chronojet. Generally, your force marker placement really depends on whether you're going first or second. You know, going first, you're gonna go like, you know, 1 to rear, do your time leaper turn, and then at the end of turn you're gonna put 1 to Vanguard. Then if you re-ride, that also opens up another question. You already have 1 on rear, so you can put 1 to Vanguard, so your next stage turn is even bigger. But if you didn't re-ride, then only after rewriting you can put this here after the next stage skill use. But then, you know, you into another turn and it's like, okay, do I keep building up on this one to make these ribbles that call out in the battle phase even stronger, or do I make the Chronojet even bigger, or do I dedicate to yet another big column here on the side? And sometimes, you know, this could be how your force marker progression goes, and then you basically get 2 swings from rears that are pretty big. You can reset them into ribbles, and then on top of that the Chronojet gets bigger and bigger, and on the re-ride you always get more, so that like the next stage is almost always getting PG'd. Keep that in mind. Next stage is almost always getting PG'd because they know they can't PG the Chronojet, so you can kind of like build up to something like this this where you have somewhat pressuring rear guards that ask for at least 20k shield or so, and then the Ribbles can capitalize off of that and push for even more. Sometimes, especially in late game, when you discard the Ribble, you might even go behind the Vanguard to basically make it so that she's a 13k booster to your already like mega chunky Vanguard to just make sure you win on that turn. So there's a lot of things to consider when doing your force placement, and then my biggest tip honestly is just to play this deck as much as you can, because with each matchup and each different player that you play against, you'll notice different things that you can do to adapt to the situation. And I think that this deck in particular, much like Luard, can adapt to those situations and adapt to where they put the forces to actually distribute the powers and actually deliver the most optimal way of finishing the game. All right, let's take a look at some mulligans. So just randomize my deck and see what we draw into. All right, so this opening hand is actually really nice. We keep this because it's our best ride, because we draw an extra card. You want to keep the Ribble because it basically gets you the, you know, combos going on. And I guess we keep one grade 2 if it's a Nabu this turn, so it's not the best possible one, but it's still pretty decent. So let's see what we draw into, and let's go. 1, all right, that's our searcher. So if we hit something that isn't the grade 3, we can find it, and wow, that's actually incredible. So as you can see, you know, and even if we didn't hit every single grade like that, it's still pretty nice because, like, you know, we draw for, I mean, first I gotta shuffle. So we shuffle, we go through it, we get the cut, and then, you know, we draw for turn. Wow, we drew into another Chronojet. That's pretty cool. We ride into this, we draw for turn, and let's say we're going first, so we pass. The next turn, you know, we take a damage or something like that. Goodbye. And then we draw 2 for turn because of the Chronotooth's effect. So we draw into the Nabu, which is really nice. You can basically go into the Nabu already, use a skill to discard 1, and essentially just like start popping off already. So here, you can even discard the spare Chronojet. You sometimes you do rewrite it when you can, but you don't want to like clog it up too much, especially in the early game against like decks that can rush you down really easily. And then you can basically just like swing and drive check 2, you know, you get a crit, very cool. But even now, like, look at this, like we're at 8 cards in hand, just like absolutely chilling on it. And then like if you wanted to like discard the Ribble, I don't think it's worth discarding the Ribble here. You really, if you only have 1 in hand, you really want to keep it for later on, because then like when you actually go into your turns to, like, you know, like for example this Time Leaper turn, you know, like we draw a heal, but that's like completely fine. We can basically just now like ride up into the Chronojet, get the force, and then basically like call down the smoke gear. We can now discard anything for the stride. Honestly, this hand, there's like, I think I want to discard the Nabu at this point, and then you basically just like go into the Time Leaper, and you know, you do your thing as I showed in the combos. You guys already know what follows from here, but you know, that's just kind of like an example of how you can play things out. And again, depending on the matchup, depending on the deck, depending on what you're playing against, you can do different things. All right, so let's do another one. This time, you know, let's say like going second, although it doesn't really change your early game too much. All right, this is a pretty funny one. You basically just keep the tooth because, you know, that gives you the extra draw. Here, there is a point to keep one of the grade 4s, because that way if you find the Lost Gear dog, you can actually, like, you know, reveal one of them to search your grade 3. But at this point we don't even have grade 2, so we want to make sure we're not even grade stuck. So okay, ear cob, that's a good one to pick up. Another ear cob, okay. All right, so this one's not too sexy, so this, like, we're gonna have to see what we draw off of this Chronotooth, and also this ear cob will be very key. So if your opponent damage denies you, that's one card that you're missing from your hand that you really want to, you know, make sure you don't get grade stuck on. So we're gonna draw for turn. Another Chronotooth, that's actually perfect. And so, you know, we're just gonna like ride up, draw. All right, we get a grade 2, that's okay. And then, you know, let's say they crit us or something, that's the optimal case scenario here. We get a draw on top of that, you know, very cool. Lost Gear dog, that's cool, but where's the grade 3s at though? So we draw for turn once, draw for turn twice because of Chronotooth, still no grade 3s. So we're gonna have to go into like the ear cob or something and basically try to get cards out of this. Like, you can also use as many potential draw cards as you want. So here, let's use the ear cob to count +1, discard 1. We're gonna discard the Chronotooth Tigar here, and then use his effect to count +1 as well to call this out at rest and draw an extra card. Still nothing. So here you got to start thinking, like, I still haven't seen my actual combo pieces. Do I try to draw into something at any cost? In that case, the Zaids in hand might actually help that. You do have Twin Drive, but if you're going to get Great Stuck, that's going to actually hurt really bad. So you potentially, there might be a point where you actually go for this and, like, let's say just like pop something that your opponent's trying to aggro you with, but you get the extra card draw from this. So let's see, like, we discard, I don't know, the spare Zaid or something, and just like draw an extra card to try to find the grade 3. We don't, so then our only call at that point is to basically go for the Twin Drive. And there we go, we went into a double grade 3 of all things. So you kind of sometimes have to dig like that. And that's what I mean, like, you have a lot of cards that help you dig and help you find pieces, whether that's, like, you know, just a grade 3 to not be grade stuck on, or if that's actual pieces like the Ribble. So for that reason alone, it's pretty important to, like, be careful with how you play out your cards, and there's a lot of cards that help you dig as well. So yeah, I really hope this deck profile was useful to you guys. I tried to cover as much as possible, and I think this already has been running for a very long time, but I hope that this was useful to you guys and you managed to learn something new out of it. If you have any questions in the comments, I'm always open to answer them as well. I'm honestly playing this deck so much right now, and I think, you know, if I'm participating in Springfest, I'm probably bringing this as well, and I've been playing it on all the different shop leagues and stuff like that, and any other tournament I can get my hands on. So if you have any questions, or if I have any like future developments on this deck, I'll definitely keep you guys posted, whether through Twitter or Discord or whatever else. And if there's some kind of Eureka big brain strat that develops, I'll probably even cover it in a video. But honestly, I really recommend this deck as the competitive deck for this season. I think it's super fun and really like, there's so much to learn. The potential of this deck only gets bigger with how good you become with the deck, because using Ribbles efficiently is honestly really difficult, and like the more you play the deck, the better you get at it. You know, whether it's using it as a multi-attacker, whether you want to hold it for a certain turn, how much you want to push, how fast you want to push, how early you want to push, all those different things get answered the more you play this deck, and I really recommend it. So there's a lot of really cool different combos, and I hope that I was able to showcase at least a couple of them to you guys efficiently and kind of show you the different intricacies that this deck has in terms of all the different pieces that it actually plays. So yeah, that's going to be basically it for this deck profile. If you want to get any of these cards that you've seen in this video and you live in Europe, you can check out parkage.com, use code DifferentFight for a 5% discount at checkout. But on that note, that's basically going to be it for me today. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.